Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch, and welcome today to my annual review video, the 15 minutes or so every year where I discuss the 5 watches or watch related things that please me the most and the 5 watches or watch related things that displease me the most over the last 12 months. Always a fun video, always fun to unleash dark Jody for 50% of it. And always a good reason to thank you all for another fantastic year on the channel. I wouldn't be doing this if you weren't watching the videos. So if you want me to keep doing this, then please keep watching the videos. And if you're not already a subscriber of the channel, there is a large button with the word subscribe on it that can help you out with that. And as always, I want to hear from you. So give me your top and bottom of the year. I'll see you in the comments section. Alright, I'm generally a happy and positive person, so I'm going to start with the 5 nice things before moving on to the 5 not so nice things. So let's kick off with the Citizen Tsuyosa. As you may be aware, I've done a bit of a 180 on Citizen over the last 5 years or so. I thought they were boring and vanilla, and some of them most definitely are, but some of them most definitely are not. They're great value, they come with great warranties, and Citizen are now consistently releasing watches in great colours. Please welcome to the stage the Citizen Tsuyosa. Very much case in point, I picked up a yellow-orange dial one lightly used in the middle of the year. Now I'm not going to lie to you, I sold it on after the review, but that doesn't mean to say it's not worthy of a place on my top 5 list today, because it is. The 8000 series by Miyota is not going to win any awards, but it's also not going to let you down in the short term or the long term. The glass is sapphire, which is something you do not get on the equivalently priced Seiko, and the automatic Tsuyosa is miles cheaper than the quartz version of the PRX. And I think we've reached a point now with this watch where there is greater supply than demand, so the prices have dropped. You can buy one in Australia for $395 brand new with a 5-year warranty. That's $265 US. Even less in sale, I've seen them as low as $329 new. That is a bargain, especially when you consider how nicely the whole thing is put together and some of the vibrant colours you can choose from if you're bored with black, blue and white. I may have sold it, but I may well end up buying another one next year. Alright, you knew it had to be on here somewhere. How could I not include starting my own micro brand as one of the 5 best things to happen this year? Because it absolutely has been. We launched in October with a 4-week pre-order at a discounted price. I asked you for a little bit of your money and a little bit of your trust, and you put a lot of your money and a lot of your trust in me and my partner Stephen. And we're working hard to ensure that trust has not been misplaced. We went to the assembly plant 2 weeks ago to watch the origins being made, and we were really happy with what we saw. We're hoping to deliver a number of weeks early unless we have some issues with customs and the like, and we have now signed off and paid for prototypes of watches number 2 and number 3, both coming in the first half of 2024. We want to establish and build Erebus as a micro brand that offers really high quality watches at great prices, and I think we're off to a great start. So thanks to everyone who pre-ordered. I look forward to shipping your watches very soon, and if you didn't pre-order, don't worry, we ordered extras, so we will have stock and you can buy one early next year. We don't want to be a brand where everything is permanently sold out. We want to be a brand where you can actually buy the watches. This year, one of my favourite micro brands, Direnzo watches, revisited their second model and the one that defined their look, the DRZ02. And they released it on a bracelet and with a smaller case size, creating the DRZ02 Reduced. And in doing so, they created one of the best micro watches of the year. Think about just how many micro brands there are now and how many models each of those brands creates. It's therefore not easy for a brand to have its own distinctive look, to be able to view one of their watches with the logo covered up and to know immediately what you're looking at. But I think that is what Sergio Direnzo manages with his watches. He has a signature look and is now just tweaking that look into different case shapes and watch types, you know, diver, integrated bracelet, sports watch, dual crown compressor, etc, etc. And not only do you get a beautiful dial and unique case with this one, but you also get some great colours. Sergio includes purple and now burnt orange in his palette, both colours that have become must-haves for those who enjoy colourful watches. The biggest problem about buying a Direnzo is actually buying one. They only make small batches and they're usually gone pretty swiftly. I've got Sergio's next watch in the queue for review, a small second. Stay tuned. And how can I talk about the 5 best watch-related things of 2023 without talking about the shitbox rally? Mr. X and I bought an old Mercedes and ended up driving it 7,000 kilometres around Australia on some of the roughest roads I have ever encountered, and indeed some of the roughest roads the rally had ever been on in 13 years and 30 different editions. The Mercedes is faultless. It is proudly parked outside of my house with a fresh 12-month registration and insurance ready for its next adventure. Now, the rally itself was clearly a lot of fun, but the reason it's on this list is because you lot helped us raise $31,000 for the Cancer Council. Mr. X and I put in the first 5, and then we got very generous donations by G-Shock Australia and Fears Watches of Bristol in the UK. Those watches sold for 10,000 Australian dollars, and we got a further 16,000 in individual donations, including the people that we bought the car off of and Mark from Long Island Watches, among many, many others. This community can be a funny place sometimes. We love a scandal, and boy didn't we get one in 2023. But there are so many good people who are part of our group. I say it a lot, watch people are good people, and you all proved that once again with your generosity. Plus, I managed to raise a further $2,500 for Save the Children, thanks to the generosity of a friend called Phil, who gave me a bunch of watches that he no longer required that I then sold. So that's $34,000 donated to charity this year via this channel, and mostly via your generosity. So give yourselves a collective pat on the back. You are indeed good people. Now, rounding out my top 5 for the year, we've already had a Citizen, but it was another good year for their arch rival, Seiko, of course, and I'm going to include my favourite Seiko from 2023 on the list today. But what one was it? There have been rather a few. Was it the Seiko Navigator that other people have heralded as the best watch of the year? No. What about the King Seiko then, with that beautiful red wine dial? No. Was it the Alpinist GMT, my Christmas present to myself? No. Was it the small 5KX? No. Was it the Plastic Fantastic SRPK? Definitely not. Was it the Hojicha Roasted Green Tea that I awarded Dial of the Year to? No, it wasn't that one either. My favourite Seiko of 2023 is my Presage Irish Coffee. I paid $399 Aussie dollars for it in a sale. I got a 3-year warranty, and I got one of the best looking dials I've ever seen on an affordable watch. Some Seiko dials can be a lot. The Hojicha, for example, is beautiful, but it's full on. The Irish Coffee, on the other hand, is complex, is intricate, is beautiful, but is also really subtle. It doesn't even reveal its charms at arm's length. You have to go in closer to see the beautiful concentric markings. But once you see them, you know that they're there. Ever shifting, ever changing with the light conditions, just a little work of art on your wrist. And once again proving that you don't have to spend a fortune in this hobby to get a simply stunning watch from a fantastic brand on your wrist. Alright, let's kick off the dark side of the list with a watch that I unboxed in October, and I told you at the time not to buy it. Now, I don't often take something straight out of the box and already know that it's a turkey, but this one was so obviously not up to snuff, irrespective of the price that it is offered to you for. It's a Matthey-Tissot that I got from JOMASHOP. Now, I had previously thought that Matthey-Tissot were a junk brand leveraging off a dubious connection to a famous name to sell cheap homages. However, early in 2023, I looked at a retro reissue from the brand of a classic Type 20 Big Eye chronograph. Now, it didn't perhaps change my mind, but it did give me an insight that there had been a little bit more to the brand than I had thought there was. But when I unboxed this piece of rubbish, I realised that I was right. They are in fact a junk brand leveraging off a dubious connection to a famous name to sell cheap homages. They wanted $300 US for this. It had mineral crystal, a cheap nasty feeling bracelet, and the bezel insert from a GMT on a 3-hander. That to me is unforgivable. It means that the brand either doesn't know what it's doing or doesn't care about what it's doing. Now, Matthey-Tissot have made hundreds of thousands of watches over the course of decades, which means they know what they're doing. They just don't care about what they're doing. Don't buy a watch from a brand that doesn't care about what it's doing. Don't buy a watch from a brand that doesn't care about you. Don't buy a Matthey-Tissot. At number 2, it's the new Casio Duro. What a shocker. I think I was more disappointed by this one than anything else this year. Casio's Duro is an amazing watch, but it's a big watch. 44mm in diameter, 22mm lug width, and with a fairly lengthy lug to lug, meaning it's not for every wrist. All Casio had to do was shrink it a little bit. 40-20, 41-20, and I reckon they would have sold 500,000 of these very, very quickly. But what did they do? They boil washed it. It went in as a 44-22 and it came out as a 36-16. It came out as a kid's watch. Now, I always roll my eyes when people apply those labels to watches. Oh, it's a boy's watch, it's a girl's watch, it's not a man's watch, etc, etc. Sizing is of course subjective, but they just shrunk this one so much that they missed the middle of the bell curve, and they missed it by a mile, I reckon. And if that wasn't bad enough, it went from 200 meters of water resistance to 50 meters of water resistance. Maybe Casio intended it to be a child's watch, but I would have thought that a brand that's in the business of selling watches, it was the wrong move. They should have released a slightly smaller version and not a much smaller version. I bought those two, but I sold them both. I don't even think I bothered sizing up the bracelet on the braceleted version. A watch that should have been in the top 5 list today instead ended up in the bottom 5. So from a big brand that took a classic watch that people were clamoring for a smaller version of and made it too small, to a big brand that took a classic watch that people were clamoring for a small version of and didn't make it small enough. Next on my list today is the Bulova Lunar Pilot Mini. The Lunar Pilot for me is like Cinderella's slipper. I want it to fit me and I've tried it so many times, but it doesn't fit me. It's just too big, it's just too flat, and it just doesn't work on my wrist. And if my wrist is average size, then that's going to be the same for a lot of you as well. So I was giddy with anticipation when I heard that Bulova were releasing a smaller version of the Pilot in 2023. But it wasn't quite the same watch. It was far dressier, and it wasn't actually that much smaller either. I mean, here are some wrist shots of the classic original. If you do have the wrist for it or don't mind a big watch on your wrist, I think these are a must for affordable collectors. Such a great watch with such a great story behind it. And here are some wrist shots of the, inverted commas, mini Lunar Pilot. Of course, as discussed, sizing is subjective. And of course, I could get away with it. And that's what I said in the video. Alright, it kind of fits me. I could wear it if I wanted to in a way that I couldn't wear the original. But why all the high polished surfaces? Why did they fundamentally change the look of the watch? And if I'm using terms like get away with it, that's not ideal, is it? That's not how you should be talking or thinking when you're spending decent coin on a watch. So I took mine back to the shop that I bought it from, and I'll be hanging on for the release of the Micro Lunar Pilot, which probably won't be much smaller and probably won't be released until 2028. You know, it quite often happens that watch brands feature on the top half and the bottom half of the list in the same year. Both Seiko and Tudor have done it in the past. They've been on top and bottom half of the list, and this year it's the turn of Citizen. You know, I had been eyeing up this rather unusual Citizen for ages. It's not actually a retro reissue as such. This one has never gone out of production. It's the same watch they've been selling since the 1980s. Now you might therefore expect that the tooling had been paid for many, many years ago and they would be selling these cheaply. But they're not. They're really expensive. This one was $300 odd and I got it on special. I reckon on a good day, if I was being generous, it's worth about half of that at best. Now, I remember the 1980s well. The technology was incredible, but none of it actually worked very well. And this watch has a built-in temperature sensor. Incredible tech for the 1980s. However, if you want to check the ambient temperature of the room that you're in, you have to take the watch off your wrist and leave it on a surface for half an hour for the watch to cool down sufficiently before you can take the temperature. What is the point of that? Clearly then, it's just a piece of retro fun. Nobody is using it to buy it as a tool. At $300 then, it's a seriously expensive bit of retro fun. Go buy yourself a Casio calculator watch instead for 50 bucks and leave the rest of your money in your bank account. You'll thank me for it, I promise you. That Citizen was pretty awful, but the worst single watch that I have looked at all year was this Bell & Ross copycat from an AliExpress brand pretending to be German, calling itself Specht and Söhne. I'll be honest, I didn't pay much more than about 55 or 60 US dollars for it delivered, and it was reasonably well machined, had a sapphire crystal and Seiko Mecha Quartz movement. But when I unboxed it, I couldn't work out what was going on with the chronograph. The central hand was not a chronograph hand, it was a second hand, and nothing happened when I pressed the chronograph button, except that after a minute, the 9 o'clock register hand moved forward. And then I worked out what they had done. They had put the wrong dial on the wrong movement. The watch needed a third register for the chronograph timer at 6, but it did not have it. Specht and Söhne clearly then decided that they cared so little about their customers that they would sell the watch anyway, even though it was completely unfit for its purpose. Shocking, but perhaps not all that surprising, and at least I got a laugh out of it in the video. It's a chronograph movement, but they have failed to put 3 registers on the dial. They have, for reasons best known to themselves, deleted the chronograph second-hand sub-register that should be on the dial at 6 o'clock. For fuck's sake, what on earth were they thinking? So there you have it, some serious highlights from Citizen, from Direnzo, from Seiko, and from the generosity of all of you. And some serious disappointments from Casio, from Bulova, and from Matthey-Tissot. Don't forget to give me your best and worst of the year. Roll on 2024. Thanks for making it all the way to the end. Why don't you watch last year's or the year before's while you're here? I'll see you again in the next one.